here heap dump file is downloaded. We can analyze that by heap file. And we can go for thread dump. We can go for thread dump. It is showing you all the threads which are running. All the threads which are running. Next one is loggers. You can see the loggers which are available. You can see environment of our application, loggers. All the loggers are available at the info level. All the loggers are available at the info level. Root level is info. Levels of error, warn, info, debug, trace. The root level logger is info available in our application. Right? Metrics of our application. Metrics of our application. You can get the metrics of our application. See here, these are the metrics of our application which is executing. Application started time, disk free, disk total, all the information we are getting. Actuator info, actuator conditions, config props. We have one config props endpoint. What is the purpose of config props? It will give you all the configurations which are loaded. Can you see a port which is loaded by our application? Port. The port I have configured 9090 as a config property. See here, port 9090 which is loaded. The config props which are loaded by our application we can access by using config props. Right. By default, health endpoint exposed in actuators. If we want to expose all the actuator endpoints, if we want to expose all actuator endpoints, then we will write below property. If we want to expose all the actuator endpoints, then we will write below property in application.properties file. Then we can write below property in the application properties file. What is the property file? Management.endpoints.webexposure.include is equal to star. Star means everything. Star means everything. /beans. It will give all the beans which are loaded by our application. /beans is one endpoint which will give all the beans loaded by our application. /mappings. It will give all the URL mappings available in our application. /mappings, it will give all the URL mappings available in our application. /health. It will give health status of our application. Health status of our application. Config props. It will give config properties loaded by our application. Config properties loaded by our application. Config props. Right? Next one, metrics. It will give metrics of our application. Loggers. It will give loggers configured in our application. Etc. Like this, there are several endpoints are available. Thread dump, heap dump, thread dump. It will give all the threads information in our application. Heap dump. It will download the heap details of our application. Heap dump. It will download heap information in one file. Heap dump file. Okay. Like this, there are several endpoints are available in the actuator. So whenever you add actuator dependency in the form.xml, by default only health endpoint is exposed. In the actuators. If we want to expose all actuator endpoints, then we will write below property in application.properties file. Management.endpoints.web.exposure.include. I will give it as a star. Okay. Beans. It will give all the beans which are loaded by our application. Mappings. All the URL mappings available in our application. Health status of our application. all but not beans. Can we exclude one endpoint? Based on the requirement, we can exclude the endpoints also using actuators configuration. By using, we can exclude actuator endpoints using below configuration in application.properties file. You can include the endpoints and we can exclude the endpoints also. Guys, currently when you see our application, how many endpoints are exposed? Currently, how many endpoints are exposed? Currently, how many endpoints are exposed? 13, because I have included all. I want to exclude one endpoint, which is management dot endpoints dot web dot exposure dot exclude. I'm giving beans. What is the meaning of this? Include star, exclude beans. So what is the meaning of this configuration? What is the meaning of this configuration? What is the meaning of this configuration? All the endpoints I want to expose except the beans. I want to exclude the beans here. Now right click, run as root app. Right click, run as root app. Now can you see how many endpoints are exposed now? How many endpoints are exposed now? Only 12. Only 12. Go to actuator URL. Beans is coming or not? Beans not coming. Can you try to access beans now? Can you try to access beans now? 4 not 4. Can you try to access beans now? No, because beans endpoint we have not exposed. Can we exclude multiple endpoints? Can we exclude multiple endpoints? Mappings also I want to exclude. Mappings also I want to exclude. Now let's stop this. Run this application. Run as boot app. Run this application and run as boot app. See here, how many endpoints are exposed now? Only 11, because I have excluded mappings also. Now you cannot access beans. You cannot access beans. You cannot access mappings because both are excluded from my configuration. I want to expose all the endpoints except the beans and the mappings. Except the beans and mappings. Understand? Now, all these endpoints are binded to HTTP GET request, guys. Now, all these endpoints, these all are binded to HTTP GET request. All these actuator endpoints are predefined and they are binded to HTTP GET request. Are you understanding my point? Are you understanding my point? All these actuator endpoints are predefined and they are binded to HTTP GET request. All these actuator endpoints are predefined and they are binded to HTTP GET request. Is this clear? Is this clear? Now, we have one special endpoint in the actuator. We have one special endpoint in the actuator that is called shutdown endpoint. By using shutdown is a special endpoint in the actuator. By using that we can stop our application also. In actuator we have a special endpoint called shutdown that is binded to HTTP post request which is used to stop the application. In actuator we have a special endpoint called /shutdown. This is special. Why I am calling as a special? This endpoint is binded to HTTP post request. This shutdown endpoint is binded to HTTP post request. This shutdown endpoint is binded to HTTP post request. Using this endpoint, we can stop our application. Using this endpoint, we can stop our application. Are you guys clear with this one? We have to enable and expose this endpoint in our configuration. We have to enable and expose shutdown endpoint. We have to enable and expose shutdown endpoint in our configuration. This is a special. Now, see here how we are going to write this. Management dot endpoints dot web dot management dot endpoints dot web dot management dot endpoints dot web dot shutdown exposure management dot endpoints dot include second I forgot that management dot shutdown dot management dot endpoints dot shutdown dot enabled is equal to true. Management dot endpoint dot shutdown dot enabled is equal to true. So we need to write this endpoint. Okay, now let me stop my application. Let's run our application. Run as boot app. Run our application. Run our application. Application started. How many endpoints are there now? 12. Earlier 11 because total 13. Out of 13 I have excluded 2 and I have added 1. Now it became 12. Now go to this URL. Can you see that shutdown endpoint? Can you see the shutdown endpoint is exposed? Can you see the shutdown endpoint is exposed? Yes or no? Shutdown endpoint is exposed. Now, can I send a request to the shutdown endpoint from our browser? You got 405. Somewhere we have seen what is 405. Can you read this? Can you read this? Why we are getting 405? Why we are getting this method not allowed? Whenever I send a request from the browser, by default the browser will send a get request. But shutdown is binded to get request or shutdown is binded to post request. Post request. But what request I am sending from a browser? Get request. Request method get not supported. What it is saying that? Request method get not supported. Request method get is not supported. Request method get not supported. Can we send a post request now? We need a postman. Go to postman. Go to postman. Go to postman. Go to postman. Close this. Close this. Give this URL. Post. Click on send. Shutting down. Bye. Application stopped. Now you see the console. You see the console. Application got stopped. My application got stopped. Let me run the application and show you once again. Run as boot app. Run as boot app. boot app. Is my application running? Started. You can see server is also on. Now let's go to our postman. Make a get request. What happened? Method not allowed 405. Why we are getting method not allowed? Why we are getting method not allowed? It is binded to post request. Click on post and send. Message shutting down. Bye. My application stopped. Go to this. Application stopped. Server stopped. Server stopped. So can I say this is shutdown is a special endpoint? All the endpoint methods are binded to get request. All the endpoints are binded to get request. But the shutdown is the only endpoint which is binded to post request. There is a reason why they made it as a post, guys. If it is a get request now, everybody will send the request easily and the application will be stopped. They want to make it little bit complex. Because if it is a get request, easily we can send the request from the browser and we will stop the application. So that's why they made it little different. They made it as a post. So you cannot send the post request from the browser directly. You need to go for a postman and you need to send that request. Alright, now read this. With this we know what is actuator in the Spring Boot. Actuator is one of the feature available in Spring Boot. Actuator is one of the feature available in Spring Boot. Actuators are used for providing production ready features. These all are called as production ready features, guys. Whatever I can say, these all are accessing all this information, nothing but getting the production ready features. Official definition is that. Actuators are used for providing production ready features of the application. By using actuators, we can monitor and manage our application. Now, my application is running in one server. The server is available in one computer. The computer is available in USA. Getting my point? My application is running in one computer. That computer is running in one server. The server is running in computer. Computer is running in USA. When my application is running in that computer server, how can I understand my application details? What is the health? How many beans? Config props, threads, heap, beans, loggers, environment, all the things. In order to access, in order to monitor, in order to manage our application, in order to monitor and in order to manage our application, we are using actuators concept. Actuators provided by Spring Boot. Actuators provided by Spring Boot. To configure actuators in our application, Spring Boot provided below starter. To configure actuators in our application, Spring Boot provided below starter. We have to add that in form.xml file. Spring Boot starter actuator. Once our application started, we can use below URL to see actuator endpoints. Once our application started, we can use below URL to see actuator endpoints which are exposed. This is the URL to see all the endpoints which are exposed. What is the default endpoint which is exposed in the actuator? Health only. By default, which endpoint is exposed? By default, which endpoint exposed? Health endpoint exposed. How can I expose all the endpoints? By writing this property. Management.endpoints.web.exposure.include. Management.endpoints.web.exposure.include. This is the property name. Star means everything. So total 13 endpoints it will expose. Total how many endpoints it is going to expose? Total 13 endpoints it will expose. Total 13 endpoints it will expose. Okay. These are the some endpoints. Some examples I have given. All these endpoints, all these actuator endpoints, we can access. These all are binded to get request. These all are binded to get request. How to access one particular endpoint? Accessing the endpoint. access endpoint. Access endpoint. How can we access http://localhost:9090/actuator/endpoint name? How can we access the endpoint? How can we access this endpoint? This endpoint we can access by using this URL. http://localhost:9090/actuator/endpoint name. By using that URL, we can access. Now, if you don't want to enable or if you don't want to expose particular endpoint, can we exclude it? Can we exclude one endpoint in the actuator? Yeah, we can exclude it by using beans and mappings. We can exclude one endpoint by using beans and mappings. Okay. In actuator, we have a special endpoint called shutdown. In actuator, we have a special endpoint called shutdown. This shutdown endpoint is binded to HTTP post request. Using this endpoint, we can stop our application. My application is running. I want to stop it. For that, we have a endpoint. Right. How can we enable this shutdown? By default, shutdown is disabled in the Spring Boot. In order to enable it, we should write this property management.endpoint.shutdown.enabled. Management.endpoint.shutdown.enabled is equal to true. When you send a request to this endpoint/shutdown, then that application will be stopped. This is binded to post request, guys. You can't send the post request from the browser directly. You need a postman to send this request. You need a postman to send this request. So the conclusion is the actuator is one of the powerful concepts in the Spring Boot, which is providing some endpoints to monitor and manage our application. In order to use actuators in our application, we should add the actuator dependency in the pom.xml, which is provided by Spring Boot. Here in the properties file, you can configure which endpoints you want to expose, which endpoints you want to exclude, shutdown you want to enable or not. So this is the total configuration of our application.properties file. You got my point? So with this you understand what is actuator in the Spring Boot and how to work with the actuator in the Spring Boot. Fine. Thank you.
Recording stopped.
Right guys, with this we understood actuator, and tomorrow no session. So tomorrow